tell you what, too, I was so happy when the Trump administration got rid of that mandate, because now I don't have to pay $500 a month. I can put $500 a month in my own kind of savings account and use that as a help kind of thing. Okay, anyways, getting back to this. So we got this simplified schematic picture of a ventral brainstem. A couple eyes on here, really not eyes, but they're mammillary bodies. And so we're going to have three parts to the brainstem, essentially. Remember when we did that structural organization, you had the mesencephalon, and then you had the rhombencephalon, which consisted of the metencephalon and the myelencephalon. So essentially, all that complex terminology amounts to this. You got midbrain, you got the pons, and you got the medulla here. Midbrain, pons, and medulla. And then we're going to have our 12 pairs of cranial nerves. So the first one is going to be the olfactory nerves. Before I go there, though, let me just, put this disclaimer here that, so most of your cranial nerves are going to emerge from this ventral brainstem. There's going to be a few exceptions, right? The exceptions to that is going to be cranial nerve number 1, olfactory, cranial nerve number 2, optic nerve, which are tied into the proencephalon or forebrain. You've got cranial nerve number 4, the trochlear nerve, which emerges from the dorsal part of the brainstem. And then you have cranial nerve number 11, spinal accessory nerve, where the spinal portion is going to actually emerge from C1 through 5 spinal cord segments, specifically the ventral horns of gray matter, C1 through 5. All other cranial nerves, though, are going to emerge from the ventral brainstem here. Okay, so since the olfactory is not one of those, we're going to just kind of draw it in here. It kind of looks like a Q-tip. These are the olfactory bulbs and tracts. So they are not really, these are not really the olfactory nerves. The olfactory nerves are actually going to be these sensory nerves that originate from receptors, chemoreceptors in your roof of your nasal cavity, right? And then the actual nerve fibers go up through the cribriform plate of your ethmoid bone. So right up above your nasal cavity, behind your eyes, is that ethmoid bone. Remember the ethmoid bone? It has the cribriform plates with those little holes in there. So this is where the fibers from your olfactory nerve actually go up through. So collectively, that is your olfactory nerve. Then those nerves will then synapse here at these olfactory bulbs. Okay? And then that information then is relayed back from here through these olfactory tracts to the anterior, you're going to learn next quarter, to the anterior commissure, and then to the uncus portion of the temporal lobe of your brain for processing. Okay? So that's the olfactory pathway. So that's cranial nerve number 1. So we'll just put cranial nerve, I guess I can put it over here. No, right here. So cranial nerve 1, olfactory, and we just list them up over here. Cranial nerve 1, olfactory. And we said olfactory is for smell. Then you have optic nerves. So draw some optic nerves here. Here's an eye, and here's another eye. Coming out of the backs of the eye is the optic nerves. So these are going to be cranial nerve number 2. So cranial nerve number 2 is optic nerve. Optic nerve is for sight, obviously. Okay, then we're going to have these, well, I should probably, let's label some of these other things that we got in our picture here. So these things here are called mammillary bodies. These are part of your limbic system. Where you have remember you had your hippocampus down there above the temporal lobes. They had these two crura that came together to form the fornix, right? the fornix then descends down through the hypothalamus, and on the other side of it becomes these two little green dots called the mammillary bodies. So here's that green fornix here coming up over the top of the brainstem from the hippocampus. Then it pierces the hypothalamus, and it comes out on the other side as these little green dots, which are the mammillary bodies there. So that's what we got there. Those little green dots are mammillary bodies. Part of the limbic system. This here part is the tuber, called the tuber cinereum, and that's where you're going to have, from the tuber cinereum, you're going to have issuance of the infundibular or pituitary stalk, and then gives rise to the pituitary. Tuber cinereum. Tuber is like a pile, or like roots are tubers, right? And they leave like bumps in the ground. And cinereum means ash, so it's like a pile of ash here. And then from there you'd have the pituitary stalk coming out. These things here are called peduncles. Actually, cerebral peduncles. Cerebral, yeah, that's right. And again, peduncles means arches. So like I always joke around, McDonald's golden peduncles. Right? McDonald's golden arches. And then in between these peduncles is called the interpeduncular fossa, because it's a groove there, and it's between the peduncles, so it's interpeduncular fossa. But the reason why I'm doing all this is because I'm going to draw in the oculomotor nerve, which is cranial nerve number 3. So cranial nerve number 3 actually comes out here, and that's the oculomotor nerve. So cranial nerve number 3, oculomotor. And oculomotor nerve does what its name says. So motor muscles, oculo eye. So it's going to innervate your eye muscles. In fact, it's going to innervate all of your eye muscles except for the lateral rectus and the superior oblique. So we'll go off to a little bit of a tangent here. Talk about eye muscles. So extrinsic eye muscles. Extrinsic eye muscles are also called extraocular muscles. Okay, you have two types. You have rectus and you have oblique. Rectus means straight, so they're just going straight back and forth in the orbit. And oblique means angled, because they're going to come in at the eye at an angle. The rectus muscles, we have lateral rectus, medial rectus, superior rectus, and inferior rectus. Of these oblique ones, we have superior oblique, and we have inferior oblique. Okay, and then as far as these muscle innervations are concerned, we have a simplified formula. So it's LR6SO4, and you can put over 3, or some people will go like 3 times this, whatever you like. It's kind of cool because, it brings back memories of chemistry. Hey, Doc, what's going on? Sure, take what you need. Adam's usually teaching my cover for this morning.
Oh, I was wondering that.
So we got LR6SO4. So lawrencium sulfate, which has nothing to do with this, but its lateral rectus is innervated by cranial nerve number 6. So this one here, LR6. And SO4, superior oblique, is innervated by cranial nerve number 4, which is the trochlear nerve. Okay? So if you remember this little formula, either one of these, then you know the innervations for all of these eye muscles. And then we'll go one step further than that. If you want to know what the muscles do, the easiest thing to remember is that The rectus are going to move the eye in the direction that the name says it is, right? So lateral rectus is going to make you look laterally, medial rectus medial, superior rectus up, inferior rectus down. And the obliques are going to move the eye in the direction opposite of what the name says. So the superior oblique is going to make you look down, and the inferior oblique is going to make you look up. If you look at those muscles on the models, you'll see why. And then we have other, like you have secondary motions, and you also have tertiary motions as well. But we'll get into that more when we get into the eye itself. But just now, some of the basic stuff is that. All right, anyway, so that all coming from here. So that means that all of our eye muscles are going to be innervated by this oculomotor nerve, except for LR, lateral rectus, which is innervated by 6 abducens, and SO4, superior oblique, which is innervated by 4 trochlear. Okay, then we get into cranial nerve number 4 next, the trochlear nerve. This is the one that comes around from the back. It's one of the cranial nerves that comes around from the back. It's not emerging from the front. It's the only one that comes from the back of the midbrain. The back of the midbrain is called the tectum. And then we know what it does already because we got our formula there. So this is cranial nerve number 4, trochlear nerve. So cranial nerve number 4, trochlear. And the trochlear nerve we know is SO4, superior oblique innervated by trochlear. Okay, then we have cranial nerve number 5. Cranial nerve number 5 looks like the Roman numeral 5 coming out of the pons here. And that's the trigeminal nerve. So that's going to be cranial nerve number 5. You can see it looks like itself. And it comes out of there. Trigeminal. Now the trigeminal nerve does a bunch of different things. Cranial nerve number 5 is sensory. Whenever you think extracranial and you think sensory, you think cranial nerve number 5. So it has ophthalmic divisions, maxillary divisions, mandibular divisions, right? So it's going to be sensory to those particular areas extracranially. It's going to be, so let's see, we'll say sensory to the face. It's going to be sensory, so face, and it's also going to be sensory to the general senses, this is the key one though, to the anterior 2/3 tongue. Its general senses to the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Special sense of taste will be from cranial nerve number 7 that you're going to get here in a second. The trigeminal nerve also innervates motor. So the motor here is going to be muscles of mastication, which are your chewing muscles. Muscles of mastication, which include temporalis, the masseter, the lateral and medial pterygoid muscles. Okay, so those are your muscles of mastication. Then if you remember from our neck innervation thing that we said, remember our ansa cervicalis rule? The ansa cervicalis of the cervical plexus innervates most of the muscles of the anterior triangle of the neck, which are your hyoid muscles, except for the following. Cranial nerve number 5 innervates the blank and the blank. And that was on your test. Anterior belly of the digastric and mylohyoid. You're right. Anterior belly of the digastric and mylohyoid. So those are also motor innervations. So anterior belly, digastric, and mylohyoid. Okay. And then you'll see that there's 2 tensor muscles. When we get more into cranial nerves here, you'll see that there's going to be 2 tensor muscles also innervated by cranial nerve number 5. The tensor tympani and the tensor belli palatini. So that's, trigeminal does a lot. Okay, now let's go to the next grouping, which we can kind of go like this. So at the border between the pons and the medulla, which is the pontine medullary junction, we're going to have three cranial nerves emerging here. We're going to have 6, 7, and 8. Okay? So we have cranial nerves 6, 7, and 8. So 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so cranial nerve number 6, we already know, because we have LR6. So 6 is abducens, and it's going to be LR6. Then we have cranial nerve number 7. Does a lot of things now. So we have another one of those that does a lot of stuff. And cranial nerve number 7 is your facial nerve. Okay? Sensory-wise, the facial nerve is going to be taste, anterior 2/3 tongue. And it's going to be mostly motor though. So it's going to get all the motor muscles of it's going to, not muscles of mastication, that's 5. It's going to get all the muscles of facial expression. So all the muscles of facial expression by cranial nerve number 7. Muscles of facial expression. Okay, some of these things are going to have parasympathetic components to them too. We'll talk about that later on. But 3, 7, 9, 10 also have parasympathetic components, but that's getting in too much for what we want to do today. That's facial. And then let's go to cranial nerve number 8, which is easy. Cranial nerve number 8 is vestibulocochlear. The vestibulocochlear nerve has a vestibular and cochlear portion. The vestibular portion is going to be responsible for equilibrium and balance, and the cochlear portion for hearing. So put equilib and okay. All right, next grouping. So this structure here, let's color it in pink. It's called olive.
What is the word right after sensory and the facial nerve?
Taste.
Oh.
I forgot my E. Taste, anterior 2/3 of the tongue. And motor is the muscles of facial expression. The facial nerve also has other sensory parts, but I'm just giving you the general things. It's going to have sensory also too, like the external ear, some of the external acoustic meatus. You're welcome. So now we're going to go into the next grouping behind these things, which are called the olives or olivary nuclei. So on the medulla oblongata, we have these olivary nuclei here, and on the models they kind of appear like this pinkish color. And behind the olive, we're going to have cranial nerves issuing from here, and they kind of look like these little fibrous things on the model, so I'll draw them kind of like that. But they're going to be 9, 10, and 11, like that. So we have cranial nerve 9, 10, and 11. And I want you guys to know when you're doing these things to know the Roman numerals and the names of these things. So cranial nerve number 9 is the glossopharyngeal nerve. The glossopharyngeal nerve, let's go sensory first. So sensory for the glossopharyngeal nerve is going to be gen, meaning general, and taste to the posterior 1/3 tongue. Okay? So glossopharyngeal nerve sensory is going to be general and taste to the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. When I talk about general senses, like for cranial nerve number 5, and general senses for like this one here, we're talking about tactile senses like vibration, touch, pressure, pain, temperature, proprioception. Taste, is the chemical special sense for, taste. So for the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, trigeminal does the general or tactile senses. The facial nerve is going to do the taste to the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. But for the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, the glossopharyngeal is going to get both general senses, your tactile senses, and taste to the posterior 1/3 of your tongue. Okay, then cranial nerve number 10, vagus nerve. This vagus nerve, as you saw this last time, does a lot of stuff. Remember we said the vagus nerve innervates all the pharyngeal muscles, except on that, the muscle outline that I had for the neck, right? It says that the cranial nerve number 10, the vagus nerve, innervates all pharyngeal muscles except for one, the stylopharyngeus, which is innervated by cranial nerve number 9. Remember that? And we said that cranial nerve number 10 innervates all laryngeal muscles. Cranial nerve number 10 has 2 laryngeal branches, a superior laryngeal and a recurrent laryngeal branch. The superior laryngeal branch innervated that cricothyroid muscle, but all other laryngeal muscles were innervated by the recurrent branch of the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve innervates all pharyngeal muscles except for one, the stylopharyngeus, which is going to be innervated by, oh, I forgot to write it down, motor. This is going to be to the stylopharyngeus. Okay, stylopharyngeus muscle is the only muscle that this glossopharyngeal nerve innervates. All other pharyngeal is going to be from this vagus nerve. And then the vagus nerve is going to be parasympathetic to the viscera of your neck, the viscera of your thorax, and the viscera of your abdomen. Right? So the viscera in your neck is going to be the thyroid gland and the parathyroids. Then in your thorax, you're going to have parasympathetic innervation. There's an esophageal plexi, cardiac plexi, aortic plexi, pulmonary plexi. Then you're going to have anterior and posterior vagal tubes to the esophageal and stomach. And then you have innervation parasympathetically of the gastrointestinal tract up through and including the first 2/3 of your transverse colon. Right? Parasympathetics after that point is going to be from S2 through 4. So vagus nerve does a lot. When in doubt, pick vagus nerve. Okay, so it has a huge parasympathetic component. It also, you'll see, now we have an outline of the cranial nerves. On that outline of cranial nerves, you'll see that the vagus nerve innervates one tongue muscle, the palatoglossus. All of the tongue muscles are innervated by 12. It innervates all palate muscles, except for one, the tensor veli palatini, which is innervated by V3. It innervates all pharyngeal muscles, like we said, except for the stylopharyngeus, which is by 9, and all laryngeal muscles, which are innervated by the vagus nerve itself. Okay, so it does a lot of stuff. Then, so that's 9, 10, and then 11. 11 is easy, you guys know that. What does 11 do? So, spinal accessory. Guess what muscles? Traps and SCM. That was a test question. Those are like, back when I went to school and stuff, those are like typical board questions, like the levator scapulae and the rhomboids are innervated by what nerve? Dorsal scapulus. The SCMs and the traps are innervated by spinal accessory. These are all just real basic questions that are on there. Okay, then we had one more, and that's 12, and then we'll be done for today. 12 is the hypoglossal. The name says it all, hypo, underneath, and glosso, tongue. So it's coming up from underneath to innervate your tongue muscles. Remember when we did our picture of the ansa cervicalis and the cervical plexus, right? And we had cranial nerve number 12 up at the top with something, that was a test question with the C1 fibers there. Then it goes off to innervate the tongue muscles. That's the hypoglossal, cranial nerve number 12. So it gets all tongue muscles except for one, the palatoglossus, which is innervated by vagus nerve. So this is 12. And that's hypoglossal. So it gets tongue muscles except palatoglossus, which is vagus nerve. Cranial nerve 10. Okay, so the hypoglossal gets all tongue muscles except the palatoglossus, which is innervated by the vagus nerve, which is cranial nerve number 10. All right, and in conclusion of everything here, I want you to know parasympathetic innervations. So, cranial nerve number 3, cranial nerve number 7, cranial nerve number 9, and cranial nerve number 10 all have a parasympathetic component. So cranial nerves, this is the last thing, with parasympathetics is going to be 3, 7, 9, and 10. And that's really important on your upcoming tests. And just like the general descriptors and stuff that we had for all these things, that will be on this test. We're going to get more specific when we get into like the third part, when we start to do the eye, when we start to do the ear, when we start to do the nose and the mouth, all that kind of stuff. All right, any questions? I know we covered a lot of stuff, but you know, this is stuff we're going to keep repping out in class.